Hi, I'm Mrs. Lindsay Sigman, and welcome to Back to School Night. This course is American Literature in Composition. It is primarily a 10th grade course. It is designed to be a college prep course, and it is also a Keystone course. So part of what we do this semester is prepare students to take the Literature Keystone near the end of the course. This course is anchored in those core ELA skills. A lot of what we've been doing so far is a review and a next step. So it really focuses on reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and how to build and strengthen the skills that these students already have, and how to apply them in new and more sophisticated ways, oftentimes integrating many of those skills to apply them to a new text or in a new set of circumstances, or to look at how authors within a reading integrate many of them to create a designed effect. And so a lot of times it's not so much that we're doing something new, but we're applying skills and concepts that these students have learned in new ways, or ways that require a greater deal of sophistication in their study of these areas. The core curriculum of American literature is a variety of types of texts and types of tasks, because this is the last time that students will all kind of have this one course that comes in their English track. After American literature, students get a lot of decision as to where they want to go and what English courses are going to make up the rest of their required coursework, and even possibly some of their electives. And so one major goal of this course is to expose students to a lot of these different areas and build towards mastery in a lot of these areas, so that students are able to make that next step decision on what courses they want to take with the knowledge of what they like, where their strengths are, where their struggles are, where they think they want more practice in, what they really are just passionate about and want to do more of. And so American literature, you'll see, covers a lot of ground for that reason, as well as the fact that it is a Keystone course, and so we're aiming to make sure students are prepared to take that test and be successful with it. The first unit, which we actually are just finishing right now, is really looking at the foundations of America, American values, and this requires us to look at a great deal of nonfiction texts. And so we start with things taking place at America's founding. We look at excerpts from a lot of informational nonfiction, things like the Declaration of Independence, and we study those texts to really look at reading comprehension skills, main ideas, key details, but then also really expanding our study of rhetoric and how authors convey a point to a desired audience with a number of techniques. And we really examined the effectiveness of those techniques and how those many facets, the audience, the message, the context surrounding it, all impact one another. And the goal is that students can then apply those skills as both a reader and when they are writing or creating their own text as well. And so in part of this unit, students either worked independently or with a small group to create a persuasive project where they applied some of these skills. They've also done a number of written paragraphs where they've examined another writer and really looked at how that author is conveying his or her ideas, whether that was in a speech or in an essay. And they also are currently taking an exam where they're reading fresh text, things we didn't study as a class, but that fit in with some of these unit ideas, and also ask them to apply the thinking that we've built. So they should be comfortable identifying techniques, using the vocabulary, but then going beyond that to explain and really make connections as to what they see in these new authors. We also have kind of previewed, we did a little bit of a study with some fiction and some poetry, because those will also be a major part of the course. They come in a lot more in our next unit. Our next unit, which we'll be starting, is revolving around The Great Gatsby as our core text, and really looks at ideas of the American dream. From a skills standpoint, this unit is really fiction focused. looking at how authors of works of fiction use the different elements of fiction, those building blocks that these students have been studying since kindergarten on up, things like character, setting, plot, conflicts, themes, and other ones like that, and really starting to look at how authors can shape a reader's response by the way they convey a single element, but more importantly, by how they use those elements together. And so again, that's where that sophistication of thinking comes in. Students are really starting to examine the interconnection and the integration of those elements and how that impacts the way the writer writes, and then how we as a reader are likely to respond to the text. As part of this unit, they will also look at a variety of short little excerpts from other books, from short stories and things like that, so they can not just see how one writer applies these elements, but really start doing a compare and contrast about how subtle, distinct differences in the way writers develop these things impact that response, or how we read it, or looking for patterns and similarities that different writers use, and what does that mean for how we respond to these texts. At the end of that unit, we'll be transitioning into a combination of things. Students do have a little bit of choice as to some of the ideas we look at. We'll look at big ideas like man's relationship with nature and individuality in the community, and we'll use a number of texts to do so. This third unit has an intensive study of short stories, so building off of our initial study of fiction. Again, students will select a number of their texts from a long list of American works for that. They'll also select a classic novel to read to add to our study of fiction. We'll do a little bit more intensive study on poets and use that to look at different time periods in American literature and how that has evolved over time. And then they'll look at that nonfiction again, coming back to this first unit, and can they still apply those initial skills that we built on when we look at new readings and different types of speeches and essays and things like that. That unit will also require them to do some research and look at what other voices and writers of literature have examined. And so again, building those writing skills is really central as well. The grading for this course and the assessments are really anchored in those core types of assignments and activities that you're going to see. So students should be reading, writing, speaking, and listening on a daily basis. So you can always ask them, what are you reading right now? What's your ongoing or your next writing assignment? What'd you talk about in class today? And students are really encouraged to kind of see the way those different aspects of our class connect. We will do frequent keystone practice kinds of questions so that they're ready for that. But on an ongoing basis, you'll also see a lot of reading response questions. That may be their homework that they're finishing. That's also going to be a lot of what you'll see in the grade book for the smaller activities, are a few questions where they're responding to something we've read. And then a big section of the grading comes from their writing. They'll do a lot of shorter paragraphs practicing responses to literature and argumentative writing and analytical writing. And then we'll build towards some of these longer essays where they're really more independently applying these skills. We also write a variety of tasks, again, going back to that idea of preparing them for whatever that next step is. So they'll do informative writing and argumentative writing. They'll write creatively with a variety of tasks to really, again, kind of get that exposure and practice with different areas of ELA. And then finally, when it comes to the discussion, we'll really look at an informal day-to-day discussion and then some more formal kind of presentation style tasks. What is it that a good speaker and listener does? Because again, we know collaboration and communication are such huge components of kind of wherever these students want to go from this point forward. Goals and expectations for the class really is to build increased confidence for these students, taking skills that they maybe have practiced before or been introduced to and moving towards those levels of mastery. And if the text complexity, the reading challenge goes up, can they still have that confidence and skill to be able to independently navigate those kinds of assignments or apply these skills to new tasks that they might see not just in English classes, but in other coursework as they move forward, or exams, or even more real world outside of the classroom scenarios. A big part of that is students taking initiative if they are struggling with something, so that I'm able to provide them with that more individualized instruction. And then, as I mentioned before, a huge goal of this class is preparing for that next step. And so students will be involved in self-assessing and reflecting to make sure they feel confident in where they are and they know what they're going to want to do with these kinds of skills and how they might apply or use them. Classroom rules all boil down to respect, especially in a class where I'm asking them to write constantly and to discuss constantly. It's really important that we have that kind of climate where they are responding to one another respectfully, but also giving that good feedback that's going to help them to grow as readers and writers and speakers and listeners. So again, if you have any questions, this course does culminate then near the end of the semester in the Keystone exam and some bigger end of semester projects. So if you notice your students struggling with any of that longer work, or if you yourself have any questions about any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact me at my school email at any time. That's Sigman, LSIGMAN @cocalico.org. Thank you so much for taking the time to view this today, and I look forward to getting to know you better as I work with your child throughout this semester. Thank you.